Somewhere in the hills of southeastern Turkey, there's a structure that shouldn't exist. Massive stone pillars, some heavier than a loaded truck, arranged in perfect circles and carved with images of foxes, scorpions, and vultures. For decades, archaeologists assumed something like this could only be built by a settled civilization. People with farms, granaries, a workforce that didn't have to spend every waking hour chasing food. Except the people who built this had none of that. No crops, no permanent homes, no metal tools, just hands, stone, and rope, moving 10-ton blocks up a hill for reasons nobody could explain. So here's the real mystery. What could possibly motivate a group of nomadic hunter-gatherers to organize labor on that scale, thousands of years before anyone invented the wheel or wrote down a single word? For a long time, that question sat unanswered. Then researchers tested the residue inside enormous stone vats found at the same site. What they found inside changed the whole conversation. Traces of fermented grain, not a small batch, enough to suggest large gatherings, possibly seasonal ones, where people traveled long distances just to be there. This wasn't a village. It looks more like the world's oldest known party venue, and the drink on offer might be the very thing that pulled civilization together. To understand why that's not as strange as it sounds, you have to go back much further than any monument, further than any human settlement, further than humans themselves. Long before our species existed, our primate ancestors were already developing a relationship with alcohol, just not the kind anyone brewed on purpose. When ripe fruit falls to a forest floor and sits there too long, wild yeast gets to work on the sugars inside it, and the fruit begins producing small amounts of ethanol as a natural byproduct. A biologist at UC Berkeley built an entire theory around this, arguing that early primates who ate that overripe fruit weren't just getting calories, they were getting a mild buzz, and they liked it. Over millions of years of natural selection, the primates who were drawn to that faint alcoholic scent were often the ones who found the ripest, most nutrient-dense fruit first. The taste for alcohol wasn't a modern invention layered onto human biology. It was baked into the biology long before biology became human. So by the time actual humans show up, the craving is already old news. The only thing left to figure out was how to make it happen on command instead of waiting for nature to do it by accident. And the evidence suggests that breakthrough came far earlier than most people assume. In a cave in northern Israel, researchers uncovered stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock, used by a group of hunter-gatherers roughly 13,000 years ago. Residue analysis on those mortars turned up soaked, sprouted grain consistent with an early form of beer. These people hadn't invented farming yet. They were still gathering wild grain by hand. And yet brewing was already a skill worth mastering. That timeline flips the story most of us grew up with. The common version goes, humans settle down, start farming, build villages, and eventually stumble onto fermentation as a happy accident. But the cave tells a different story. Brewing came first, while people were still moving from place to place, chasing herds and seasons. Which brings the mystery full circle back to those giant stone pillars in Turkey. One leading theory, championed by a researcher who has spent his career studying ancient alcohol, is that farming itself wasn't invented to make bread. It was invented to make beer. Bread demands grinding grain into flour, kneading dough, and controlling a fire precisely enough to bake it, a genuinely complicated process for people without ovens. Beer, by comparison, is almost lazy. Soak grain in water, walk away, and let wild yeast do the rest. If the desire for that drink was strong enough, it may have been the very thing that convinced roaming groups to stop roaming, plant seeds, and wait around for a harvest. Under that theory, farming, arguably the single event that made cities, writing, and organized society possible, might trace back to people wanting one more round. The evidence only gets more specific from there. In a Neolithic village in central China, dated to around 7000 BCE, archaeologists found pottery jars holding the residue of a fermented drink made from rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn fruit. That's not a lucky accident. That's a recipe, with multiple ingredients deliberately combined by someone who understood exactly what each one contributed. By the time you reach ancient Egypt, the drink has become something closer to social infrastructure. The laborers who built the pyramids were paid partly in beer, several liters a day, as a standard part of their wage. That wasn't a perk. Nile water was frequently unsafe to drink untreated, but the brewing process made beer far safer, while also delivering calories and nutrients that a person hauling limestone blocks in the desert genuinely needed. Add to that the religious dimension. Egyptians credited the god Osiris with the gift of beer, and it appeared in temple offerings, burial rites, and medical remedies prescribed by physicians for everything from digestive trouble to infection. One drink was functioning simultaneously as a paycheck, a water filter, a meal, a medicine cabinet, and an offering to the gods. Put the timeline together and the picture becomes hard to ignore. Millions of years before humans existed, a craving for fermented fruit may have shaped which primates thrived. Thousands of years before farming, people were already brewing in caves. Around the same era, the largest known structure of its kind may have functioned as a gathering place built specifically around drinking together. Soon after, precise recipes appear, and within a few thousand years, entire civilizations were running on it, economically, medically, spiritually. The usual assumption is that alcohol showed up after humans built organized society, almost as an indulgent civilization could finally afford. The evidence increasingly suggests the reverse, that the craving came first, and civilization was partly a byproduct of chasing it. So the next time you see a drink in your hand, you're not looking at some modern invention layered on top of human life. You're looking at the tail end of an impulse that predates your entire species, running all the way back to a primate on a forest floor, drawn to a piece of fruit that had been sitting out just a little too long.